Aloha and welcome to our program, Maunalua, Past, Present, and Future. My name is Marty LaPrade. I am your host for today. Please welcome our guests, Ms. Martha Kawasaki and Mr. Charles Van Rees. So Martha is a homegrown ecologist. She was raised on Oʻahu and did her undergraduate studies right here at the University of Hawaii in Hilo. She now works for the USGS Pacific Island Ecosystems Research Center. She is a bioscience technician. Martha, what got you interested in this type of work?
Well, it actually started my junior year of high school, Marty. I did the HYCC program, the Hawaii Youth Conservation Corps, and I got introduced to a number of biologists there, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is a job I could have. And so I started pursuing that, and that's how I ended up at UH Hilo, and also how I ended up in the PIPES program, so the Pacific Internships program for exploring science. It's run out of the University of Hawaii at Hilo, and that's where I encountered my first wetland ecologist. I interned underneath a graduate student that was studying the food availability for the IO at Hamakua Wetland, and I fell in love with wetlands, and that's how I kind of got involved, and I knew at some point I'd end up back in a wetland, and that kind of brings us to today.
I see. And also with us today is a colleague of Martha's, Charles Van Rees. Charles has been our guest before and shared his studies of the Hawaiian moorhen, or alaiʻula. Charles is a conservation biologist and a PhD candidate from Tufts University. We're honored to have you both here with us today. And I'd like you to explain to us what you do and how you're working together in the field. But first, Charles, can you please recap for us in case our viewers didn't see the last episode? Where did we leave off?
Sure. So last episode was, I guess, sort of an update from the first episode that I did with you guys last year. We were talking a little bit more about my research on the alaiʻula, or Hawaiian gallinule, and discussing sort of the importance of understanding the movement of Hawaiian waterbirds, because their habitat is sort of fragmented. It's in these very small pieces all over the island, and we want to know how they get around and how that can sort of basically inform our management in keeping the species around.
Excellent, excellent. Martha, please tell us more about your work with the Navy and the wetlands in the Pearl Harbor region.
So the Navy is actually funding this pilot study that the USGS, so it's federal government funding another federal agency to do this research. And the hope from this research is that we're going to find these movement patterns and find where the habitat resources that need to be protected are in the Pearl Harbor region. And the Navy owns, you know, a pretty great span of land in Pearl Harbor, so this is actually going to benefit their restoration efforts and their efforts to kind of enhance or, as I said, restore some of these wetland areas, even fish ponds that are in Pearl Harbor.
So there's a historic fish pond in Pearl Harbor?
There are several historic fish ponds in Pearl Harbor. Currently, right now, they're restoring a fish pond at a housing complex called McGrew Point. The fish pond is a local pa'iao, I believe is the pronunciation for it. And so they've actually cleared, just this year, they've cleared all the mangrove out of the area. They've started rebuilding the rock wall for the fish pond. And it's been having a real positive impact on the IO, or the Hawaiian stilt population.
Oh, so they like being in the fish pond itself.
They just, you know, from the beginning of my time here, which started in April, is when they first started clearing the fish pond. And I'd see 1 or 2 stilts down there. And just this past week, I was down there around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and 11 stilts flew in. And, you know, 11 adults, and then within that group, I hadn't noticed until the adults showed up, but there were also a couple of nesting birds that were sitting on nests in the fish pond. So it, you know, kind of shows that when you restore you know, wetlands, when you restore even traditional fish ponds, the birds will come back, they will use the resources, and it just, you know, enables birds that have, you know, fragmented habitats to kind of have these little stepping stones between major resources.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Now, the stilt, what it needs to nest, is it just mud, or they like particular plants, or?
Stilts are actually really interesting. They will just nest on flat ground. Like, they'll find a mud flat, you know, they may throw a couple twigs together, or they'll make a bowl in the dirt, and that's it. That's all a stilt needs to nest. That's all they want. They don't build these elaborate nests. You know, they don't have little island nests like coots and moorhens tend to do.
I see. Charles, please tell us how you're working with Martha in identifying and tracking wetland birds.
Sure. So I guess the whole collaboration sort of started, I want to say, maybe in the middle of the winter or something like that. Marty's supervisor contacted my advisor for advice on how to capture IO, because my advisor had done a lot of work on them in the early 90s. And they started talking about, oh, what's the sort of research you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll let Martha explain a lot more. She knows it better than I do. But the essential gist of the research, of course, is that the Navy wants them to understand the movement habits of IO and also ŌleloNet, am I correct?
Yes.
In the Pearl Harbor area. So, of course, that overlaps very nicely with the type of work that I'm trying to do for the whole island of Hawaii, or the whole island of Oʻahu, getting movement of ʻAlaiʻula. And so we're both sort of answering very similar questions. And as Martha will explain, the way that they're answering it is sort of really, it's a fantastic complement to the type of research that I'm doing, and it's a very fancy way of doing it that sort of requires some infrastructure that their project is mostly providing. And so it's sort of been ballooning into this cooperative effort between me and my colleagues at U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Martha and her colleagues at USGS. And we're hoping it's really going to develop into something that enables us to do some really high-quality monitoring of the bird populations. But I'll kind of let her...
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So Martha, please explain. How do you trap the birds, for one thing?
Oh, well, it's... in the previous segment, we all saw how Charles traps his birds. My birds are not very, they don't pick up very easily on cracked corn or dried cat food. They're actually a little bit more leery towards new things. So we've had to kind of, you know, try several methods. One of the methods we tried was just a basic walk-in trap. It's, you know, if your grandpa ever caught pigeons, or if you ever caught pigeons, you know, there's a one-way door, the bird walks in, and it can't get out because of the way the door is set up. That didn't work, and that's because, for one, the ʻailai, the Hawaiian coot, is very leery towards walking across any line. It will not cross, they do not cross lines. It's actually very adorable to watch a coot kind of walk along, you know. One of the other methods we use is what's called a whoosh net, and basically, so we have these poles in the water, poles on the land, and it pulls tension on a bungee cord with a net attached to it. And there's a mechanism that, you know, we can either pull, or there's a remote mechanism that lets the net loose, and it flies over the top of the birds and traps them underneath the net. And you kind of look a little concerned. I've had the net tested on me because I'm not gonna, you know, trigger something on the bird that I would not, you know, just to see what the force is of the net. The other method we've used on coots and also the Hawaiian stilt is what's called a net gun. So it's a CO2 cartridge in the back end of a net, and the CO2 cartridges puts pressure on it, shoots the net out over the top of the bird. It's the same thing as like a whoosh net. It's just more portable. And
are you pretty good with that tool?
I'm fairly good. I wouldn't say I'm the best. There are definitely people who are better than I am, but we've caught at least 2 stilts that way, 2 adult stilts that way.
Great.
And kind of cracked into, you know, how to catch stilts the best way, and it's actually really exciting because we've caught adult stilts, which is unheard of. For the most part in the state of Hawaii, the method to catch stilts has always been to grab the juveniles before they fledge or around the fledging. So just as juveniles are learning how to fly, that's the method that other researchers have used to catch stilts. We, to the best of my knowledge, are the first ones to actually catch adults.
Well, that's
and
exciting.
So we have 4 adults that are banded. And banded, and also with my identification tags on them, and 1 juvenile.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you can actually band the juveniles, and the bands will grow.
You can actually band the juveniles, and I believe I brought a picture or a photo of that.
Oh.
We can go to the photo.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come up in just a moment.
I'm sure it will.
And so the bands, then they'll just expand as the leg grows, or did the leg not grow that much?
We actually put the bands. Oh, here's actually the juvenile wearing her bands. Her bands are a little difficult to see in the picture, but this is actually at the Honouliuli wetland.
Okay.
Her band code is blue aluminum and red yellow. And,
I see.
And this is another one of our stilts who has his bands on him and also his identification tags. So this is at the Waiava wetland, and his bands are yellow over aluminum, yellow over white. And so much like Charles' banding, we also do banding, but in addition to that, we also put what are called radio telemetry tags on them. So they have these little kind of tags that go either on their backs or on their kind of wing cords. Yeah, this is actually one of Charles' birds at James Campbell National Wildlife Refuge, getting its backpack harness put on.
A
and this is
backpack, look at that.
And this is actually one of our stilts with her kind of leg loop harness.
So how does that attach, these backpacks?
So the backpacks, everything is customizable. And so we have these ribbon cords.
I see.
With, like you can kind of see in the photo, you can go back to that one of, that one in particular is perfect. So we have these like 2 batteries within the tag, and then this long antenna that comes off of the bird. And so with the ʻleloNet, we have the harness go across their chest, just above their breastbone, under their wing cord, and that's how it gets attached. So because the ʻleloNet and the ʻleikeʻokeʻo don't really have much rumps.
I see.
Like stilts have rumps, and also they have those long legs, so it's very difficult for them to shake off what I call a leg loop harness, which just goes over their haunches, goes over, their thigh bone, their thigh muscles, because they also, for such skinny little birds, they have very, very, very thick thigh muscles, so it's very difficult for them to shake off, a leg loop. Whereas we experimented on the ʻleloNet, and they just kicked it right off. They will not. So we had to do backpacks on those birds.
So is this a design you came up with, or is it
the
used
backpack
elsewhere?
harness has been used before. In Hawaii, they've used it on the bristle-thigh curlew, and in addition to that, nene, when they were studying the movements of nene on the Big Island, those birds had backpack harnesses. In fact, several birds still have backpack harnesses on the Big Island. Theirs are a lot larger than the ones we're putting on stilts and coots.
To fit the larger bird.
To fit a larger bird.
And so please explain, what does cracking the stilt code mean?
Oh, so when I said we cracked the stilt code, basically what we did was we learned a behavior that stilts do that we planned on implementing to trap more stilts. And so it's actually really nice what stilts do when you catch one stilt. You catch a stilt and all his friends come in and they're like, oh my gosh, you're trapped, let's try to save you. And it makes it very easy for us if we were to try to use that behavior to catch more stilts. But in addition to that, it's a little dangerous for us as well, because when you go to try to take a stilt out of a trap or out of, you know, our whoosh net, or try to get it out of the net gun net, you're constantly getting buzzed the top of your head, sometimes even getting hit by stilts trying to protect the one that you just trapped.
Oh my goodness.
So stilts band together.
Difficult.
Kind of very different from other water birds who, like, if you trap one, everybody else scatters, splits. They're like, oh man, sorry, you're done. we can't help you. Whereas stilts, they have this like family mentality that keeps them trying to protect.
It's very nice, actually.
It's I love it. I think it's wonderful.
Okay, so you attach the transmitters, and what happens next, Charles?
So, and this is sort of the infrastructure bit that I was mentioning before. This is what's so neat about the way that Martha and Eben are doing it, is that we have all these transmitted birds, right? So they have a device on them that's giving off a pulse of a specific radio frequency. And traditionally, the way that this is handled for tracking the bird is that someone walks around with an antenna in one hand and a scanning device in the other, and they're scanning through all these frequencies. And then when they find a frequency that a bird is transmitting on, they have to, you know, move the directional antenna back and forth and find what direction the bird is, and they log that information, and gradually they can sort of get an idea of where the bird is, and you know, that's one relocation,
But you have to have a person on the ground working it.
Person on the ground, and it can be very time consuming, and if you need to be in multiple areas, then of course you need multiple people. That's really difficult. And then, you know, these movements could be happening any time of day, and you don't want to have to pay somebody, or you know, have some poor volunteers stand out there 24 hours a day, obviously. And so a new development in this has been automated telemetry, where you essentially have a computer or a robot doing it for you. You have an antenna that's sitting there on its own with
There's the
a data logging device. Yeah, this is one of the antennas that Martha and Eben and I and several other colleagues set up. That was at Honolulu also. And these scanners will sit there by themselves and just run through all the frequencies that you have birds transmitted at. And then whenever it detects one, it'll log it and say, okay, I heard that frequency, I detected that at this direction, at this time, boom. And then you have that relocation. You didn't have to have somebody out there. It was just doing that all the time.
Oh. So sometimes you can set it up freely, and that last one, was it on a house, or?
That was on top of a gazebo. That was
a cool one.
That's our James Campbell Tower, because we have 3 ŌleloNets banded at or tagged at James Campbell. And what else is really neat about our telemetry trackers is, as Charles said, there's multiple frequencies you can scan through, but ours are based on identification tags on one frequency. So we just have one frequency that is constantly being scanned. All our tags are on that one frequency. So it cuts down on it jumping from one frequency to the other. Because when that happens, we could lose a bird, we could, you know, miss an identification, but all our tags are on just one frequency, and they're what's called, instead of beeper tags, they're identification tags. So so each tag has a number corresponding to it, and like, just as he said, a slight pulse that's very different from all.
So you can record individuals then?
So we are currently recording individuals at the various wetlands. As we speak.
Wow.
And you still kind of do need to go down and do the hand tracking.
Yes.
Just to, you know, make sure that, you know, if I'm hand tracking a bird and I get a certain identification, I'll go back, you know, with that timestamp where when I picked up that bird, and look at my data and say, oh, good. The tower is also picking this up, because the other thing with radio towers or with our antennas is they're facing one direction.
Oh.
And, you know, with wavelengths from the antennas, you know, it kind of broadcasts out, but there could be holes between those 2 antennas, 3 antennas, 4 antennas, depending on how many antennas you have on a pole. And so that also helps me determine, well, you know, there was this bird, it was between the 2 antennas, maybe I should put up a 3rd antenna so that it covers more of the wetland, or more of a flight pattern, which again is the idea behind our our study. And so we actually are working on getting towers put up all over the Navy lands in Pearl Harbor to look at the movements across, property boundaries, or jurisdiction boundaries. So we have, next week we're going to actually be putting up a tower at the Pohala wetland, which is a DLNR wetland in Pearl Harbor.
Oh, I see. And so do these same towers pick up signals from the backpacks on the Ōlelo?
Yep, all birds that we're banding are on the one frequency. All of them have their own identity. So just in case, one of those James Campbell birds decides to come up over the Ko'olaus or come around behind the Waianaes and come to one of our Pearl Harbor wetlands, we will be picking it up.
Excellent. That'll be exciting.
Or, same, and goes the same way for the stilts that are on the Pearl Harbor area. If they, decide to fly over to James Campbell for any reason, I'll be picking them up there as well.
So these towers are all in the Pearl Harbor area?
Pearl Harbor, and we also have one in James Campbell.
Right. That's right.
This is just the pilot study. Again, the money is coming from the Navy, so they're mostly interested in, Navy
Their
land.
area,
But also,
right.
We are collaborating a lot with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who have, we're trapping in their wildlife refuges in Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also we're having a little bit of a difficult time at first catching stilts and coots. And Charles was kind enough to let me put 3 tags on a couple of his Aiula in James Campbell.
Mm-hmm. Wow, very nice. So this research is just beginning, just since last winter.
Mm-hmm.
What are the projections, or what are you hoping to find?
Well, of course we're hoping that once we have our towers up around Pearl Harbor that we actually get to see movements, and possibly, in some of the areas where we're putting towers that we think are just going to be movement towers, well, what if a bird actually decides to roost there overnight? What is it about those resources in that area that makes it a roosting site, a feeding site, a nesting site? So
So you might look more closely at a specific area.
Yes, where we might end up looking specifically at an area that, the Navy says, oh, well, here's this area where we're getting a lot of birds coming here. It's on our land. What can we do to enhance this habitat for these birds?
Oh, that's nice. I'm really glad they're doing that.
Yeah, and again, it's the pilot study, so again, we're very interested in Navy lands, but we are also interested in other areas because there is a fair bit of agriculture in Pearl Harbor.
Right.
There's the watercress farm that's close to Pearl Ridge, and then there's a couple of lotus farms that I've found along my
So these
travels.
birds could use even small pockets of water.
Any small
wetlands.
pockets. In fact, we've had several stilts show up at the Waipio soccer complex.
Oh my.
So stilts are very mobile. They're actually the most mobile out of the 3 waterbird species that we're studying. So they can go almost anywhere. And so it's been fun for me to kind of go around with my hand tracker and kind of like look in at a golf course and see, stilts there and kind of, in my head, possibly maybe next year expanding out to more, golf courses around Pearl Harbor, maybe even talk to some of the agriculture farms to put stuff up over there.
And then eventually would you like to put them around the island to see?
I would love to put them around the island because, it's that would be the goal, is to see exactly island-wide movement.
That would really help complete the picture for several species then.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the big hope with my research as well, and this whole collaboration is that expansion would of course be incredible for my work because we have birds tagged all up and down the windward side especially, and those are areas where we're hoping to get
and
towers
even if
put
you
up.
were to go ahead and put more radio transmitters like you said you're able to do 3, then if they happen to go that way, it'd be easier to pick up on it.
Right.
It would definitely be easier. And also because a lot of the other methods for looking at movements is the color bands. So we're just adding another identifier to the color bands, is these tags that, again, you don't really need a person to actually cite the bands, although that's been very beneficial for Charles' work. But for us, because it's very possible that birds are moving at night. It's very difficult to identify color bands on a bird in the evening.
Oh, I see. Wow. Is there anything else either of you would like to add? We have just a minute left. No? So this is coming together nicely. It's a new way of studying bird movement, and very hopeful because you're going to get some really good data.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing about our towers is they're very simple. In fact, a backyard birder could install these towers. We actually have a backyard birder who's interested in adding his tags, because he's, it's very easy to get. I mean, it takes a while for the tags to come in, but once you have the tags and you have the frequency set, you can jump onto our system, which is another thing we're interested in, is if we have other people who want to put their tags on birds and just let us know what frequency we're scanning, or if they're going to be on our same frequency.
Do they have to get a special permission to catch and tag birds?
Yeah, you always need a permit to catch endangered
species.
You need permits to catch endangered species, which all 3 waterbirds are.
Might someone be able to put a tower in their yard, say if they live near a wetland, and not do tagging and banding, just watch for information?
Absolutely.
As a hobby?
As a hobby, yes.
Okay, we have a new hobby for you Honolulu residents. Awesome. And actually all the residents of Oʻahu, but especially out in Pearl Harbor for now.
Especially out in Pearl Harbor. I mean, if they want to put up tags or towers up in Hawaii Kai, or as Charles said, on the windward side, because then we could definitely see movements. Because I have a feeling that, our stilts don't, we have actually we have 2 stilts in particular that I cannot find during the day.
Oh, I thank you for sharing that with us. We're out of time. You were awesome, and I really appreciate having both of you on the show.
Thanks for having us.